Live from the Stream Center in Tampa, Florida, this is WFLA Now, powered by 1-800-ASK-GARY.
Tiger King's Joe Exotic speaking from prison in a one-on-one you'll see only on WFLA.com, a special report where Joe divulges on life in prison, his hope of getting out, and what he thinks of Carole Baskin now. It's one of our top stories right now on WFLA.com. Welcome into the Stream Center, folks. JB here with the reporter behind that story, News Channel 8's Jeff Patterson. Jeff, welcome into the Stream Center. This is a story, folks, that if you're joining us from the Tampa Bay market, of course, you saw this air in a special report on Monday night here on WFLA News Channel 8. It's a special report that we have had in the works now for a little bit. Jeff is the reporter behind it. Jeff, let's start with a reminder here. Of course, everyone knows Joe Exotic from Tiger King, the Netflix docuseries phenomenon from 2020. But what they might not remember is why Joe is in prison, and in a Florida prison at that. So remind our audience exactly what Joe is behind bars for, and also, too, how this jailhouse interview came to be.
So a couple of different things. He was temporarily in the Santa Rosa County Jail, which is where I interviewed him. He was in jail in Santa Rosa County, but he was sentenced as kind of the whole Tiger King thing was becoming a nationwide, if not a worldwide phenomenon. He was brought to trial in Oklahoma for 2 murder-for-hire plots. In other words, his friend, his coworker, Alan Glover, he offered him $3,000 to come kill Carole Baskin here in Hillsborough County. As everybody knows, or most people know, Joe really didn't like Carole Baskin, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But in a separate murder-for-hire plot, he also offered $10,000 to an undercover special agent of the FBI, and there were recordings of that. Now, Joe claims that he was set up by his friend Alan Glover, who Joe claims Alan wanted to kill Joe. But the court was able to prove, or the prosecutor was able to prove, that Joe, in these 2 separate instances, set up these murder-for-hire plots. And there's great detail about what he said he wanted to have done to Carole Baskin. He wanted her shot with an arrow. He wanted Glover to hide, not far from Big Cat Rescue in the trees, shoot her with an arrow, and then take her into the country and behead her and then bury her. He made a similar plot offer to the undercover special agent of the FBI, but in addition to those 2 counts, he was convicted of unlawfully killing 5 tigers. Joe claims that he humanely euthanized them, but the prosecutors proved that what Joe would do is he raised a lot of tigers. He would, when they were small cubs, he would sell encounters so that you could, pet the tiger or take pictures with the tiger. But when tigers get above a certain age, in other words, when they're not cute, small, and cuddly anymore, they can become very dangerous. They're, after all, wild animals. And so they would put them out to pasture. Well, Joe had, I think, 250 tigers, and it became too much for him to care for. They're pretty expensive. You have to get a lot of meat donated. You have to care for them. And so it's not easy or cheap to care, especially for that many tigers. And the allegations were that Joe, because they became so expensive, he would just take them out and shoot them in the head. Joe claims that these tigers were old and, failing in health. And so the quickest way to euthanize a tiger, he said, is to shoot it in the head. And that's exactly what he did. But those 3 things, the 2 murder-for-hire plots and the death of the 5 tigers, is why he is in prison. He's being held in Oklahoma. However, he was in the Santa Rosa County Jail because of a separate lawsuit that is still related to the Netflix Tiger King series. If you'll recall, in the series, there was music, there was a music video, and Joe purported that he sang the music. Well, another guy wrote the music, and another person performed the music. Joe simply lip-synced, his own Milli Vanilli version, I guess. And so there was a separate lawsuit about that. Joe was claiming $8 million in damages from this. The court just, threw that out. The other guy that Joe was suing walked away without having to pay a dime. And in fact, the court upheld that, Joe had not performed or written the music. So that's kind of where we were. Joe, we knew that Joe was in the Santa Rosa County Jail. We reached out to him. I spoke to him on the phone from jail. I spoke to him a number of times before we actually did the interview. So that's kind of how we got to this point.
And if you want to see Jeff's special report, you can find it right now by clicking on the link in the description on this video. If you're joining us on social media, Facebook, YouTube, wherever it may be, you'll see a link on this video in the description, and you can click on it to go to Jeff's full article, his full report that's live right now on WFLA.com. We have a snippet for you to share a little bit of Jeff's one-on-one with Joe Exotic in the Santa Rosa County Jail. Take a listen.
You told Alan Glover that you wanted him to hide out and shoot Carole, or shoot her with a bow and arrow, or cut her head off and put it in the jungle. That sounds pretty bad, Joe.
Okay, but that was all Alan Glover's testimony, and he since then has told the world and told my lawyers and handed over his cell phone that he made that all up.
There was a federal agent, a special agent of the FBI, who said that you had offered $10,000 for him to kill Carole.
Right, but in my trial, they showed the undercover video, and Joe never offered him anything.
You had this conversation with the special agent of the FBI.
I did.
And so it's pretty well known, though, that you had a strong dislike for Carole Baskin. You had said frequently you wanted her gone, right?
I just wanted her out of my hair and leave me alone, because she was doing the exact same thing with tigers that I was doing.
What do you think about Carole Baskin now?
I still think she's crazy and she killed her husband,
Yeah, Joe not holding back there on his...
Joe never holds back.
No,
Joe is a character, man. He is, if nothing else, he is a character. And that, I guess, was our guilty pleasure in 2020, wasn't it? We were all kind of cooped up. Remember 2020? We couldn't get out of the house. We had nothing to do. So Tiger King was there, and it was just this really odd cast of characters who, it was like watching a train wreck. Every time they would drop a new segment, it was like watching a train wreck. But here's the weird thing, JB.
Yeah.
Just about everybody in that series I have known or interviewed over the course of the years. And in fact, Carole's second husband, Don, I did stories with him. I knew him. I actually visited there on my personal time because Don was a pretty engaging guy. He was pretty rich.
The same Don who disappeared.
The one
I want to make sure that our audience is following.
Right.
Here.
So there is a ton of conspiracy theories about what happened to him. And Joe is adamant that he believes Carole killed Don. The theory that was espoused within the Netflix series and there's actually Facebook groups you can follow is that Carole got these giant meat grinders, ground him up, fed him to the tigers. There's no proof of that. I mean, if there was, Carole would already be under arrest. But the internet being what the internet is and internet sleuths doing what they do, everybody has gone over this time and time again.
Well, I watched your report, Jeff, and you ask in your report what Joe thinks of really what happened, the fate of Don Lewis, what actually happened to him. He has a very specific response as to what he thinks of Joe. What things happened to Don. I don't want to give that away on the live stream. We really want people to see Jeff's full report on WFLA.com. So again, the link in the description on this video. And let's talk about Howard here because you also in the piece interview Howard. That is Carole Baskin's current husband.
So Howard is a very nice man. First off, very distinguished. He is Carole's third husband. He cares a great deal about tigers. He and Carole advocated in Congress and got a law passed nationwide to put an end to these roadside petting zoos. But here's the thing, Howard has never done a television interview before this. And really, I wanted to talk to Howard about the Big Cat Rescue Act. The one thing Howard did not want to talk about is Joe Exotic. He said, I just don't want to comment about him. I don't have anything, there's nothing he would say about Joe. He is focused solely on advocating for tigers and their care and that. So I just want to make that clear that, I mean, I tried because it is the thing to talk about. I did ask him about it, but he very politely declined to talk about Joe. He will talk about the Big Cat Rescue Act, though.
And let's just really quickly talk about Big Cat Rescue, because Carole Baskin's tiger home, if you will, here in the Tampa Bay area, a longtime staple of the Tampa Bay area, closed a couple years back. Did you get a chance to talk to Howard about, life post Big Cat Rescue, Jeff?
You bet. So just to, I'm sure that people care about it because there a lot of people remember going out to Big Cat Rescue, which when Don was running it, was called Wildlife on Easy Street. The name of the street is literally Easy Street. It's out there near the Citrus Park Mall now. When I first started doing stories with Don, it was out in the middle of the country. There was no Veterans Expressway. There was nobody up there. So these cats, it was utilizing land that was not, there was no surrounding properties. It was just out in the middle of nowhere. And so now after Don passed, Carole renamed it Big Cat Rescue. She took over the operation, but now all of those large animals have been transferred to Turpentine Creek Wildlife Preserve in Arkansas, which is a much larger facility. Some could argue that it's a much better facility, but nevertheless, all of the cats are cared for, and now Howard and Carole are selling the property that has been, for Wildlife on Easy Street and Big Cat Rescue for almost 40 years now. They're selling it, and it will be developed for housing.
We have a question coming in here, Jeff. It's from Facebook Live. It's from Desiree, and it says #KJB. Is Joe doing an appeal? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, from your special report, again, on WFLA.com, that'll be a recurring theme here over the course of the live stream, folks. The live report is, in its entirety on WFLA.com. Joe has been seeking a new trial. Is he currently in prison? Is he in Santa Rosa County prison?
No, he's in Oklahoma.
He's in Oklahoma, right.
He's in a prison in Oklahoma, and he is seeking a new trial.
And is he seeking a new trial in Oklahoma or where? What
in Oklahoma.
Okay.
So because that's where his wildlife facility was. That's where he killed the tigers. That's where his offices were. That's where he court has proven that he offered money to have Carole killed. All of that occurred in Oklahoma. So he is seeking a new trial. He has appealed the court case against him. And on one level, he actually won part of the appeal. He alleged, his attorneys alleged that, there were two separate murder for hire plots, but they should have been combined as one court case and not treated individually. The appellate court agreed to a certain extent, and they reduced his prison sentence down to 21 years from what it had been, but they upheld the conviction. In other words, the appellate court upheld the fact that he had offered money to have her killed. He had killed the tigers unlawfully. And so Joe is hoping to get a whole new trial to argue those facts again, or he's hoping for a presidential pardon.
Now, okay, let's just touch on that, because I can't let you drop that, Jeff, and us not touch on it. A presidential pardon from whom?
Well, he initially asked Donald Trump when President Trump was in office. He has subsequently renewed his request to President Biden. They received no action and no response to his requests. A lot of people apply for presidential pardons, whether drug convictions or other things. And typically, hundreds, if not thousands of people receive presidential pardons, especially at the end of someone's term. Joe was not one of those people.
And clearly doing the jailhouse interview with WFLA's Jeff Patterson. Again, a special report right now on WFLA.com. I just want to speak to, it feels like such a strange time. 2020 is a year that everything was clearly upside down with the COVID-19 pandemic. We were all cooped up in our homes, quarantining, staying social distancing. I'm sure these are words and terminology that brings back not the best memories for people.
It brings back nightmares. I mean, I still had to work. I was still coming into work every day, but my goodness, how it affected our lives.
Yeah. Well, don't take it from us as news reporters, because we were covering the COVID-19 pandemic, and we were covering Tiger King as it became a phenomenon. So I want to, just for fun, I want to bring in our WFLA intern, Kylie Petrasic joining us here in the Stream Center. Hi, Kylie.
Hey, JB.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
Because Jeff and I are very, very familiar with this. Old's a good word. Familiar with this story and familiar with Joe Exotic and everything that took place with Carole Baskin here locally in the Tampa Bay area. I want to hear from you. What do you think people look back now, 4 years later, look back on the Tiger King phenomenon? What do you think the people think about? What did you think about it when it was happening?
I mean, I think Joe said it best. I think that it was crazy. I think that it speaks to the times.
He said an expletive in there, so I'm very, very grateful that you didn't drop the expletive in there. That you're hired.
I don't know. I think that it was sensational. It was scandalous. I think it would have been a hit regardless of what time of, decade that it was broadcasted. It had all of the big things that go into entertainment. It had love. It had crazy music. It was scandalous. It had like murder talks and conspiracies.
It had that mullet.
The mullet. It's Joe's mullet. Can we talk about the mullet?
Oh, we have to talk about
it's
the mullet.
in our comment section. People are asking, how does Joe still have the mullet? And how is his hair still partially bleached?
Okay, so, I'm just going to confess something here. I think this is a reporter fail. I think if I had that interview, now I was focused on the court case and, making sure I was trying to hold Joe accountable, during the journalistic thing, because, he made a lot of allegations about, I didn't try to have her killed. And I wanted to hold his feet to the fire. And so I was kind of focused on that. Now, my friends, everybody that I go out, if I'm having a beer with my Rough Rider buddies, everybody wants to know about the mullet. How is he still blonde? How can he have blonde hair? How come he doesn't have, a crew cut in prison? How can they let him still have that haircut?
Well,
I didn't ask.
I'll add on one.
Yeah.
How do we know it's his real hair? Is there any chance it's a wig?
I don't think that's a wig.
So I know you feel like it's a reporter fail.
Yeah.
If anything, I think it's a reporter achievement because there were so many. How long was the jailhouse interview, Jeff?
Oh, but see, I talked to him for, days before this. And at some point I should have asked him.
Oh, but you know what? There were more important things to worry about. And to our audience here, look, this is still somebody who has been.
Somebody said he looks like David Spade and Joe Dirt.
Ooh.
You know what I mean? So, actually, several people have said that to me. So,
David Spade, if you're watching, our most profound apologies for you getting dragged into this. But look, he's still a convicted criminal. He's still somebody who has been convicted of very, very serious crimes. So that's what's interesting about this, Kylie. And I'm going to ask you this next because some people will look at Joe Exotic as being a criminal who belongs behind bars for everything that has transpired with Carole Baskin, the plot, murdering tigers, murdering animals. And then you have the circus element, right? Or zoo, as Jeff put it in
it's a circus
in his story, where Joe feels like this, like not real character in a movie, but Tiger King was, very real for the people that were involved in Joe Exotic's inner circle or even outer circle. So all this time later, Kylie, you're kind of our outside the news world correspondent for this live stream. How do you think people feel about Joe Exotic today?
I think that they still think of him as a character. I personally didn't know that he was still in jail, much less that it wasn't still for the actual murder for hire. I don't know. I would say that the people aren't as invested anymore because he is behind bars, and especially since Carole's selling her land, nobody really cares. It feels like the plot has ended.
And then that's why Jeff, I'm really grateful about your story being published and now being out there for people to watch, is because I feel like the last time we had heard from Joe Exotic was that he was the last time really in the news, or at least mainstream-ish news and on headlines on various websites, was that he was asking for a presidential pardon from Trump. And then ever since then, it's been very, very quiet. But this is a report where now we're hearing from him for the first time in years. Did you have a chance to talk to him about just what time has done over the years?
He's not apologetic.
Clearly.
He will not apologize for anything. He stands by the claim that He never tried to have Carole killed, despite the court evidence. And I've read through hundreds of pages of documents, and the court case was pretty thorough against him. But, there were a lot of things about this to me because, as I mentioned, I did stories with Carole long before the Netflix series ever happened. She's very passionate about her animals too. And I did stories with her second husband, Don Lewis. And I mean, I was always pretty impressed by Don and everything that he did. Now, but there's other characters in the series that were meaningful to me too. A guy named Vernon Yates. So Vernon has his own, had his own wildlife rescue thing. People may remember Vernon more from there was a monkey, a rhesus macaque monkey that was roaming Pinellas County. Everybody called it the mystery monkey. It would show up in people's backyards, and there was video of this monkey hanging out on decks and in trees and everything, and nobody could ever get it. Well, these monkeys can be really dangerous. For one thing, they're infected with herpes that can pass to humans. But Vernon was the guy who captured the monkey. But in the Tiger King series, everybody remembers, well, most people from Tampa would think about this, that, Carole met Don when she was crying one night in her bathrobe without shoes walking down Nebraska Avenue. Vernon knew Carole, knew Don, and Vernon is the guy who said that on the Netflix series. So everybody who, if you're talking about walking down Nebraska Avenue in the middle of the night, especially back in that time period, that means something to people here in Tampa. There's people have their own opinion about that, and I'll leave it there, I guess.
Yeah,
Vernon is the guy who introduced that. So there's a lot of people in this series that I knew that I'd interviewed, and so when I saw this hit Netflix, I thought, this is crazy, and I know these people.
I don't know if we've ever seen a documentary phenomenon like it. I think there were twists and turns that people still remember. We were talking about it, Kylie, before we began the live stream. There are just a couple of things that occur in the documentary that even to this day, where subtlety is out the window in today's world, right, with what is going on in society these days, there's nothing that really surprises too many people anymore. This is still the series to me that Joe Exotic's life and all the supporting cast, if you will, they are real people, but it feels like a supporting cast of a movie. They, for most people, including myself, are just as interesting or just as, head scratching, if you will, as Joe Exotic is. Jeff, in putting together this story, you being so close to this story for so many years, I mean, you almost being like a historian behind all of these storylines here locally and beyond.
That's just JB's way of saying that I'm old.
Yes,
right,
yeah,
okay.
I am trying to be kind here
to
our veteran broadcast journalist here, everybody. But Jeff, I mean,
facts
really,
are facts.
In putting this together, did you come out learning anything that you didn't know previously? Was there something that stood out to you about this particular special report? And then I'm going to ask you too, just to tell us where does this go from here? Will Joe Exotic ever see the light of day? So what have you learned, and do you think Joe Exotic will ever actually be a free man once again?
So I would say I did learn some things in that, in my preparation for doing the interview, I was familiar with the court case. I knew the history of it and everything like that. But I really did do some due diligence in that I pulled up the court file and I read, as I mentioned, through hundreds of pages of documents to see how thorough the prosecutors had been in these allegations. That's why I was able to challenge Joe on a lot of these facts, because I'd done the homework. And so I would say that, just the detail that was in those documents about exactly what Joe wanted to have done to Carole. Now, you heard him in that little clip that you played, JB, that he refers to himself in the third person, which is kind of odd. Joe never did this. Joe didn't say that. Joe, this and that, which is interesting to say the least. But it's just, it adds to his character persona, I guess. But in my preparation for doing that interview, that's where I learned more detail about the complexity of the case that was brought against him. And I mean, we're kind of laughing about it because it, frankly, is kind of funny, the whole deal. But there were some horrific things done to these large cats that they were shot and killed. That's not to say that there aren't, there are a lot of these little roadside zoos that Howard and Carole have worked to shut down, where these large animals were treated horrifically. They would be chained up for their entire life. They would be in such cramped quarters that they would have deformed legs and couldn't walk. And so when they are turned loose at a place like Turpentine Creek in Arkansas, sometimes for these animals, it's their first time being able to get out and be without the confines of a small cage. And it's heartbreaking to see how these animals are treated. And so that's the sad thing about this. Here we are still laughing about it, and that is why Howard Baskin and Carole are working so hard to make sure that these things don't happen. Now, I bet, because I asked Howard about Joe 2 or 3 times because I thought it was germane to this story. I'm not sure Howard will ever talk to me again because he wanted to do the interview about the Big Cat Rescue Act and not about Joe. But it's hard to talk to Howard without bringing up Joe because that's how most people in America know him.
He says it in the or Joe says it in the story. I think that there is some truth there when Joe says, "Look, we've made money off of each other for years." I mean, there's certainly a financial component there. Well, look, you can make the argument that Joe Exotic has profited to an extent, or could you? I guess. Let me ask that in the form of a question rather than try to state how it feels to me. The finances of this, what do you think went on behind the scenes?
So, like I mentioned, it's very expensive to care for these large animals. However, they get a lot of donations. They have huge followings. People love, donating to these wildlife rescue rehabilitation places, and they get food donated to them. So there's a lot of business. There's a big business side of this as well. Now, unfortunately, a lot of these big cats are, there's rich guys out there who just want to have a cat in their backyard because they want to show them off. That's when they're horrifically treated because they're kept in really small cages that they really should never be kept in. There is an argument that there is a place for these wildlife rehabilitation places because you're keeping the gene pool alive. There's actually more big cats in captivity in the United States than there are in the wild, right? So you're keeping the biological diversity intact by keeping them alive, but there have to be standards. There have to be care and principle. And I did want to bring up one other thing that I did talk to Howard Baskin about, which is I thought really interesting, in that they have, because of the Big Cat Rescue Act that Congress passed, they've shut down these roadside attractions. However, I was sent information as I was getting ready to do this report. There was a Carnival Cruise Lines that they went down to a place in Mexico, and as an excursion, most people are familiar with cruise ships, you can pay for outside excursions, and there was an excursion to basically a roadside petting zoo. To the credit of the Carnival Cruise Line, they published a letter and sent it out to all of the passengers saying this is not authorized. We don't condone this. This is, and so they basically discouraged people from taking the tour. And I'm sure some people did, but at least Carnival stepped up and tried to do the right thing by saying this is not something that we think you should do.
Yeah, that's just interesting about the ripple effect beyond just what people mostly associate with this story, which is the characters at play here, but also too about improving the quality of life for tigers around the world. I know that's really important to Carole and Howard. Let's really quickly, I think it's important to note, you, in all likelihood, Jeff, I know you as a journalist, you undoubtedly asked Carole for an interview as part of the special report, and she said no.
So at the time when I was putting this together, Carole had been at a large conference and unfortunately became ill. And so she was not able physically to do the interview at the time. Howard was nice enough to say that he would. and I have to commend him for doing that, because ever since the Tiger King Netflix series, they feel that they were lied to by the producers, which, by the way, is why I declined to be in Tiger King 2. There's some backstory there. They really wanted me to be in Tiger King 2, but I didn't know how they were going to twist that if I did it.
Sure. That also came to light in the aftermath of the explosion in popularity that was the docuseries, as to whether, how much was left on the cutting room floor, so to speak, and how much was authentic. And then, yeah, Jeff, we alluded to this earlier, but before we wrap up the live stream, Joe Exotic, does he ever get out? Does he ever see the light of day as a free man? You've covered this story probably more than just about any journalist, at least in the state of Florida, or probably beyond that. What's your take on?
So he's serving a 21-year sentence. I think he served 4 of that now. I think he'll be out at the end of that 21-year sentence and not before. But Joe says he is suffering from, he says he's in remission from prostate cancer. And he says that's in remission. However, he says that he now has lung cancer. Joe smoked a lot of cigarettes. And so he says now that he has lung cancer. I don't have any proof whether he does or doesn't. This is just what he has told me and through several conversations. So, he's saying he's not getting adequate medical care. And so, Joe even admitted to me during our interview, prison life is pretty tough. I guess he's being treated okay by the other inmates. He's probably a bit of a celebrity in prison, but he says he minds his business and they don't bother him. So I don't know that Joe's going to make it out.
You can catch the full report right now on WFLA.com. Jeff Patterson's special report, his one-on-one with Joe Exotic, a jailhouse interview where Jeff is extremely upfront with Joe about what has happened in years past, what he is behind bars for, asking him about Carole Baskin, asking him about Don Lewis. A lot to unpack in the special report. You can find it right now by clicking on the link in the description on this video. I'd like to thank our intern, Kylie Petrasic, for joining us. And of course,
if anybody knows where Don Lewis is, please give me a call.
Yeah, or the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. They, too, are also looking for information on Don Lewis, something that Sheriff Chad Chronister has talked about in the past in the aftermath of the explosion in popularity that was Tiger King. It's all on WFLA.com. Any updates on this story, whether it be from Jeff, our entire award-winning News Channel 8 team, we'll, of course, put it on our website, WFLA.com. A thank you to Kylie. A special thank you to Jeff Patterson for his incredible report, and the very latest for you on our website, WFLA.com. From the Stream Center, have a good one, folks. See you soon.